When we talk about soft skills, we're talking about a lot of skills that have no written rules. And it is really style, personality, characteristic, nature versus nurture. I am constantly trying to role model leadership styles for my staff that I work with, as well as coach them into better leadership styles. So it is a work that I think we always have to be doing.
Infection stops where information starts. Welcome to the Transmission Control Podcast, where knowledge is your strongest defense. Broadcasting from the front lines of healthcare, we dive into the strategies, science, and stories shaping infection prevention today. Each episode, we connect you with experts on real-world insights to help you stop the spread of healthcare-associated infections, protect patients, and strengthen your practices as an infection prevention and public health expert. When the right information reaches the right people, lives are saved.
Hello and welcome to the Transmission Control Podcast. Today we are very excited to welcome Tania Bubb as a guest to talk about soft skills, building community, and developing new IPs during the orientation journey. We'll be back after a brief word from our sponsors.
Brought to you from the studios of Healthcare HQ. Let's get into it. This is Transmission Control.
Hello and welcome to the Transmission Control Podcast. My name is Garrett Hollenbeek, Editor-in-Chief of Transmission Control, and I'm joined today hosting with Jill Holdsworth. Jill, how are you doing today?
Hey, Garrett. Happy to be back and happy to be here with Tanya.
I know it. I get excited about all of our podcast guests, but I will admit that this one I've been looking forward to this one. Tanya is a powerhouse in the IP industry, a Senior Director for Infection Prevention and Control at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and immediate past president of APIC. So Tanya, how are you doing today? Welcome.
Hi, Garrett. Hi, Jill. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here also.
Yeah. So, Tanya, for the very few of our audience that don't know you, won't we have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Again, I'm Tania Bubb. I am, as Garrett said, the Senior Director of Infection Prevention and Control at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, which is located in the heart of New York City. I am also the immediate past president of APIC, so I had a wonderful presidency year last year in 2024, and Jill sat on the board, and we had a great year together, along with all the other board members. I've been involved with APIC for many years now. I won't give you the years because that will, people will calculate my age. But I'm sufficiently old. I enjoy my work. I enjoy IPC, and I very much enjoy the collegial partnerships and friendships that I've made over the years with IPs.
And just something I really admire about Tanya, just for those who are listening, because we are talking about newer IPs and how do you get more confident and how do you get going as a newer IP. And I wouldn't consider myself as a newer IP. I've been doing this almost 15 years, but I feel like you always need somebody to look up to and to feel like could be your mentor and friend, no matter what part of career stage you're at. And I feel like that's important as a newer IP too, but I feel like Tanya definitely was that for me this past year as we were on the board together. And you really have to find those people who you're like, that's the kind of IP I want to be, or that's the kind of leader I want to be. And you start to just watch them, how they are in action, how they are in meetings. And that was a piece of advice somebody gave me very early on is find that person who acts and behaves and runs things the way that you would want to, and start to figure out how you can do that too. And I feel like Tanya is that person for me. I know this sounds cheesy, but
That's a high compliment coming from you, Jill. I really appreciate that.
well, it's absolutely true.
That's so important too, because in the digital age, you can have mentors that you interact with through conferences and, maybe you see them a couple times a year, but those are still mentorship experiences that people have. It doesn't always have to be somebody working in your facility. Some of our audience members and IPs, they're out in the boonies and, critical access hospital where they're not part of community. That's a big thing we're going to get into and dig into with Tanya today is how do IPs going through that orientation journey find resources, develop those soft skills, and really find their place to develop as a long-term successful IP. So Tanya, getting started here. Now, this is more of a little bit of a tangent but I know the concept of immediate past president and president-elect, because HSPA for sterile processing does it very similarly, but that was a new concept to me. So can you explain what an immediate past president is and what that role is like?
Absolutely. When you are at the national level and even at the local level, we follow this trajectory also. When you become elected as president of APIC, you are president-elect. So you spend that first year of being elected as president-elect. And that's really the year where you're learning from the current president and you're getting to understand more about APIC, the organization, and developing really what you would like to do in your presidency. And then your year as president comes and you spend that year as president. And then the third year, for which all 3 years you're a sitting board member as well of APIC, the third year, you are considered immediate past president, in which you are being supportive to the role of the president and supportive to the role of the board members.
I like that handoff pattern because, you step into this new role and there's so much you may not know or new initiatives that, you want to drive, but it's figuring out the how of it. So I like that handoff process.
Yeah, and it's a good process for continuity too. So there's always someone coming up the chain, right? And someone that's always there kind of learning and getting the handoff.
I think that's so transferable when you're talking about new jobs, new IPs, new careers, because it takes you, I don't know, like a good 6 months to a year to even you find your way around the hospital sometimes and getting to know people. And so I think that's so applicable. It takes you kind of that first year just to kind of plan and get to know the role, just like a new IP. And so I tell people all the time, you give yourself time when you become a new IP or you take a new role, and it is okay to take that time. Whereas I think some people, especially those of us that are just, taking on a new role in a new facility, we want to jump right in and we want to be effective on day one. And that's just, it's not possible. And that's hard for IPs because we're perfectionists and we want to, go head first, right into it. I love the way that you explained that, Tanya, because it's very much just like an IP's role every day.
Right. And I like that transference of that knowledge that you just did with applying that concept to how new IPs learn. Absolutely right.
And we've heard you talk about supporting new IPs in their roles. And usually when people feel passionate about a certain topic or they're very skilled and talented in something, that comes from usually personal experience. So Tanya, what makes you, so passionate about supporting new IPs?
What drives my passion for supporting new IPs is really the opportunity to help them to navigate the transition that they're making, which is a huge transition. So starting out as a new IP can be exciting and it's also overwhelming. It's a steep learning curve. I really enjoy being part of their journey, and whether that's offering guidance, sharing knowledge, or just being supportive, it's really been fulfilling for me to see new IPs grow in their role. And when they begin to feel confident and you see that, then they ultimately thrive in their role. And the most important thing, I think, is that if you invest in new IP talent and help them to reach their potential, it also benefits the entire team and your organization positively.
That is 100% true. It's kind of the ship that lifts all other ships when a new IP feels like their organization cares about them and they feel like a valued member of the team. And, I know for myself, coming in, you're thinking about all the things you have to learn and all of the technical pieces of the job, how to round on patients and how to, not mess up your dashboard and how to put your data in correctly and how to study for the CIC and all of those like real learning things. But then there's also the whole soft skill side of the job. And so, Jill, I want to toss this one to you. Can you give us like an IP definition of a soft skill?
Yeah,
on the spot.
I actually love this topic because I think there's different definitions of soft skills. And I'm interested to see what Tanya's take on this is, because I have found that some people have good soft skills in their emailing skills. And I have found that some people have good speaking soft skills, and then some people have neither, or they have both. So it's interesting to me that some people have differences with like how they email versus how they speak, and then some people are like, man, I really need to work on my soft skills. And so some of these things that sometimes it's just part of your personality, it's just the way that you communicate. I've actually had somebody say to me like, can you read this email, because I really don't have soft skills and I'd really like you to help me with that. Some of it is just about being motivational in your leadership style. Some of it's just about the way that you speak to people. You could even consider just like your creativity in your daily life. Sometimes that can be considered a soft skill. Being able to work well with others or not working well with others is something that you need to improve on. It's something that I feel like sometimes you're born with it. Sometimes you have to really work at it, because some people, are not naturals at this. And so I'm interested to see what Tanya's take is on this, and if you've ever had to work on any of this, Tanya, or if you had to help somebody work on it, or what's been your experience?
Yeah, I agree with all of that, Jill. I think those are all soft skills. I love talking about soft skills. Like, it's one of my favorite topics to talk about. It's also one of the hardest things for people in general to learn. And it's specifically IPs, because we're talking about IPs. When I think about soft skills, I call them leadership skills. And so a lot of times when we think about leaders, we think about someone in a leadership position. I don't necessarily think that a person in a leadership position is a leader. I also think that you can be a leader in any position you sit in. And so what that means to me is really that soft skills really include all the things that make you effective as an IP. And that could be an IP director, an IP manager, an IP coordinator, an IP staff, an IP lead. So what are the things that you do that make you effective in your role? And so we discussed a bit about the steep learning curve there is when a new person enters the IPC field. Soft skills are really crucial in infection prevention. While we're learning the necessary technical skills, and that can be challenging, mastering and applying soft skills are equally important, or maybe even more important. So the IP profession really needs to relate their knowledge back to the people that's being impacted by their work in order to be effective, as I've said before. And they affect change in their organizations through the relationships and their communication styles and strategies. And without those soft skills, you really are not going to be effective. And so if you think about an IP who is a staff level IP, they have a program that they're really running. They have assigned areas, and those assigned areas culminate to be their program, and they have to be effective in their program. And the way that they're effective is by building relationships, having effective communication styles and strategies, being able to organize and manage people, and things of that nature. So when we talk about soft skills, we're talking about a lot of skills that have no written rules. And it is really style, personality, characteristic, nature versus nurture. I am constantly trying to role model leadership styles for my staff that I work with, as well as coach them into better leadership styles. So it is a work that I think we always have to be doing.
I really love how you put that, Tanya, how you said we're always learning technical skills. And I think that's something every IP has to do, whether you're new, you're seasoned, you're always having to learn those technical skills. And you could really do that with no soft skills at all, no personality, no heart or compassion at all. You could learn the technical skills, but really what makes us a well-rounded, great IP is all of the other stuff that you mentioned, and how crucial it is to master and apply the soft skills, because like you said, that's how you actually build your program as an IP over whatever areas that you're over. It's not just those technical skills, because you can learn the skills, but to really master all of the soft skills that are out there, that's how you form those relationships. You gain the trust of the teams you're working with. And that's what really makes us successful in the end. And I think it's really understated how important the soft skills can be. But learning soft skills is not about reading a book. And so I think that's the hard part. So how do you suggest that new IPs, whether they recognize or not that they don't have these soft skills, how do they learn these things?
That's a great question. I think new IPs should recognize that they need to learn soft skills. And I think that's on them to really know that. And maybe they are lucky enough to have a manager that will relay that to them. But, not everyone is that lucky. I think so. It really is their onus to be able to recognize that. I also think that APIC has resources that they could go to, which will tell them that they need to learn soft skills, such as the novice roadmap, our competency model, and other resources that will get into the soft skills that are required, the leadership skills that are required of infection preventionists. And then the new IPs should seek to find role models. And your role models do not have to be another IP or another IP in a leadership role. It can be anyone that are successful in their roles. It could be in quality, it could be in the C-suite, it could be in nursing, it could be in the physician world, right? Find someone that exemplifies what they are looking to achieve or hoping to achieve. And the thing about role modeling is that initially, when you're a novice to something, you mimic those behaviors. And then you develop your own behaviors that incorporates what you value and what works for your style. And I think that that's okay. And that's how you arrive at those leadership behaviors.
Yeah. I mean, that really is true. There's, you see these, we're getting pretty close to the Super Bowl, and everybody always talks about great coaches and great coach trees and where did this coach come from that they learned from another. And it is, I want to put an exclamation mark on that, because what you said, Tanya, about role modeling is you demonstrate it for your team. And I would guess that it's not just IPs that have learned that those soft skills from you, but it's probably other leaders that you've worked with and other people that you've interacted with. And I think one of the areas where our soft skills really get challenged, it's easier. I'll say it's not always easy, but it's easier to send a good email or like, hey guys, you're doing a great job, and kind of the enthusiastic stuff. It's challenging to have a hard conversation with staff. So whether it's about compliance, whether it's about a broken process, whether it's about something that's been brought up on every environment of care round that you've had in this department and it's still not getting addressed. To me, those are the areas where soft skills really are very valuable. So for new IPs that maybe don't have a lot of confidence in their role or how do they use their soft skills to have challenging conversations with staff?
So I have some really tangible steps that new IPs can take, which I'm going to talk about here. And the first one is it's important to stay calm and listen carefully to the concerns of their colleagues, whether this be a high-level leader or even a staff-level employee. You want to bring empathy into the context and try to understand their perspective. And that can really help with addressing concerns effectively. The IP would want to acknowledge the situation and recognize the nature of the situation, even acknowledging that it's challenging and it might even be scary. This helps to build trust and show that you understand and that you empathize. All of this is going to tie back really to those hard, soft skills, if I might term it that way.
I like that.
You want to seek to understand. So ask questions. Don't go in with solutions. Go in with curiosity, with a mindset of trying to really understand what the context or the concern is. And you might ask questions like, what are you most concerned about? And what resolution are you looking to get out of this? You want to use effective communication and provide transparency. You want to relate your knowledge back to those who will be impacted, right? And by relate, I mean make it relatable. For example, you may not want to pitch scientific stats to your financial officer, but that may in fact be appropriate for medical personnel. To your financial officer, you might instead communicate like cost benefits. Essentially, it's know your audience and be transparent about what you know and what you don't know. And again, this helps to manage expectations and build trust and ensure that your message is also being understood. You want to provide resources and support to your employees, to the employees that you might be engaging with, to navigate them through their concerns. And this could look like offering guidance, sharing your knowledge, or just being supportive depending on what the context calls for. And finally, and this is very important, commit to next steps. Verbalize the next steps and commit to them. Clearly outline the steps and be sure to follow up and follow through. And this shows that you're taking their concerns seriously and that you're committed to finding resolutions.
Wow. That's a masterclass right there. I love how you broke that down. Any IP, just snip that part of the podcast, play it back for yourself a couple times a week. You'll be in good shape. Because I would guess that if we've ever had interventions fail or had a rough experience with communicating, that it was one of those things that fell out. Either staying calm or acknowledging the situation. So that breakdown is phenomenal.
And for new IPs, I know these kind of crucial discussions or hard conversations are probably one of the things that will make you the most nervous. And I was just telling somebody recently that one of the things I dreaded the most my first year as an IP was approaching somebody to tell them they didn't wash their hands. And I feel like that's something everyone has to do as an IP. It doesn't matter how much experience you have, but it just scared me to death because, people aren't always, even though we say, oh, you should say, thank you, I'm so happy you told me. Nobody ever does that. They they have all sorts of different responses for you. So I dreaded it. And then as you progress through your career, it's, approaching surgeons and telling them they're doing the wrong thing and all sorts of different people. And so you just have to start somewhere. And unfortunately, along the way, you will have people that give pushback, and you do get used to it. And as you build your confidence, you just have to keep reminding yourself that you are the expert in the room. You're the IP. So you're the expert in infection prevention. And you just kind of have to even say that in your head. Sometimes first I do, just to give myself a pep talk before I go in.
And by the way, Jill, I still dread telling people.
I do too.
It is one of the hardest things to do. And I'm a couple of decades into this job. So I think that goes to show that imposter syndrome is prevalent.
It is. It can be a real challenge because we're expected to be experts and kind of expected on day one. I know some great advice I got early on because I can personally tend to be pretty heavy-handed when it comes to compliance and, come off a little over serious. Yeah. Oh, big time. and some of that will come back to background. If you're coming from sterile processing where everything's supposed to be perfect, you're like, that's your lens. But so the advice I got was you can have a sledgehammer or you can have a masonry hammer. And those little masonry hammers, they're doing real detailed work and very fine tuning. They're not taking out the whole part of the structure. They're both hammers, but it's right sizing, how we want to approach the situation. So Tanya, to ask you a question kind of off the outline, but in line with the conversation. How do IPs right size the hammer that they use when they address compliance issues?
Oh, that's a great question. I really love that analogy about the sledge versus the mason hammer.
There's probably a better way to say that. But
yeah, no, I think some of that takes practice, right? I think that number one, we talk about role modeling. So if there's someone that you've seen do this and do it well, then maybe you can sort of mimic or role model kind of take on the positionality that they used. But also, part of this also is staying true to yourself. I don't always think that the mason hammer works for everyone. Sometimes the sledgehammer is what works for you and your personality. And so I think that if that's your personality, as long as you're being empathetic about using that sledgehammer, then I think you can use the sledgehammer. Just understand that there are going to be consequences to that in the same way that there are going to be consequences to using the mason hammer. Maybe you don't get everything you want using the mason hammer, but you get everything you want using the sledgehammer, and your relationship building may not be as strong as the alternative. I feel like I'm vacillating a little bit here, or equivocating, I should say, a little bit here. But I think it is staying really true to your personality to the extent possible. Trying out different approaches is okay. In the advent of cancel culture, we are afraid to do things wrong or say the wrong thing. And I think we have to be a little bit more forgiving of ourselves in terms of trying out different styles that we may think fit or don't fit, and then evaluating it, self-reflecting on, did that work well or did that not work well? For a new IP, this may be a little bit harder to do than for someone who's been in the role for a long time, simply because a new IP is navigating so much. As we said, it's a steep learning curve. Another thing they can do is ask for advice from their superior or a colleague or the person that they're using to role model, to say, how would you navigate this? How do you think I should navigate this? And weigh the pros and cons.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right. And I like the nuance of your answer, because it is a nuanced thing and it's going to be case by case, and one size is not going to fit all. But I like that thought of, you can use the sledgehammer, do it with empathy. The empathy doesn't go away. So now for getting advice, and would you point new IPs to APIC, to local chapters, as we kind of give the audience some go and do's? How can the local APIC organization be a resource for them?
By actively participating in your local chapters, new IPs really have access to valuable resources. They can build a supportive network and gain opportunities for career advancement also. If you were to ask advanced or expert leaders in infection prevention how they got their start, they'll likely say they were involved in their local APIC chapter and that they had IP mentors and colleagues who encouraged and inspired them through that APIC chapter or through their network within their facilities. So being a part of your local APIC chapter allows new IP professionals to connect with their peers, to share knowledge and gain insights from experienced mentors, and it can be an invaluable career advancement and professional growth. Additionally, participating in the local chapters can provide opportunities for leadership roles, which can further enhance one's professional profile. For example, you can serve on the board or a committee within your local chapter to help build your leadership skills and as well as to expand your network.
I love that, Tanya, and you're absolutely right. The local chapter is not only a place that you meet people, you can get leadership opportunities. It can be your kind of like highway to going to do things at the national level. But I've had some of the most amazing mentors and friends that I've met through my local chapters who really have kind of propelled me into the career that I have now. But when I was a brand new IP, that's where I met some of those people. And they weren't people in my organization. They were people that were kind of all over the DC area, which is where I was at the time. And I feel like I may not have survived as an IP without them because I was, as Pat Jackson always said, a oneer. And so I really needed the support of people who had been doing it for a while. And I got that through my APIC chapter. So if you're a lone IP by yourself, that is a great place to find support and some people that will mentor you and support you.
There is an automatic bond that happens because it's like, you know, the trauma that you're each experiencing, especially like in a state, right? Like in the local chapter, you're sharing common experiences because geographically you're getting sort of the same type of patients and the same type of challenges. And so it's like this bond, I think, that happens. And I think prior to mass socialization of like virtual meetings, it may have been difficult for like IPs in rural communities, or as you said, Jill, like the oneers, the sole IPs in the facilities that they work to take part in the local APIC chapters. But now that everything is virtual, folks can like gather and build community right at their desk.
Yep, absolutely.
It is a global effort and a community effort. I think that's such an excellent takeaway from this and a great place for our IPs to take away from this. So, Tanya, I want to thank you so much for the insights you've shared, for your personal experience, and then just that encouragement to go and find community in the IP space. It's exceptional. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a fun conversation. I hope to be back soon.
Yes, we need to have you back. Well, Jill, what a phenomenal episode that was. And I was excited going into it, and I'm almost more enthusiastic on the way out. I know I was writing down notes furiously because everything that Tanya was saying was so applicable to any IP working out there. And the breakdown of soft skills and how we can approach those tough conversations it's stuff you can take and use in your facility tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd tell you, Garrett, I was writing notes furiously too. That was like attending a class, even though we were hosting the webinar ourselves. I absolutely loved it. And I loved her nod to the novice roadmap because I think that even though some of us have been practicing a long time, I still go back to the roadmap sometimes and just kind of reference things, or even the IP competency model and see where you are and just see where you might still be lacking. We don't know everything, and we can always be learning more. So going back to things like the novice roadmap and the competency model can kind of show us some of the gaps that we still have, places where we can improve, because as IPs, we're always learning and we're always improving. So she had some really great tips on where new IPs and seasoned IPs can just continue improving, building relationships, improving our programs, and really that's where it's all about, right? So as we close out today, just remember, infection stops where information starts.
Thanks for tuning in to the Transmission Control Podcast, where infection stops because information starts. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know. Connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to leave a 5-star rating and share this episode with your team. Until next time, stay informed, stay vigilant, and keep transmission under control.